He was the world's best hitman, but they made him do the unthinkable. After his sardonic act, he was deceived by his cunning clients. The clients tried to play with him, not knowing the hitman's revenge will cost them their entire progeny.
Save the fuel. Coming for you.
Welcome back to Paramount Recaps. I don't have many subscribers, but your single comment is a ray of hope to motivate me.
I think you can get to me before I get to you.
I already have.
The movie kicks off in Colombia with a plane landing at a private hangar. Andrew Vaughn is being transported, but they hit a roadblock. His team clears it up, and they head to his swanky mansion. Andrew strolls through his fancy house and dives into his indoor pool. He spots one of his watches at the bottom and goes underwater to grab it, but a guy in a breathing mask grabs him instead. The hitman holds him under until he drowns. When Andrew's body is discovered, his security rushes to the scene. Arthur Bishop, the hitman, is already blending in as a chef and sneaks around in different clothes. He slips outside, jumps off a bridge into the water, and makes a smooth getaway in a boat. Cut to New Orleans, Louisiana. Arthur hops out of his truck and onto a boat, cruising through the water until nightfall. He docks, heads to his secret hideout, and opens up a wall filled with photos of targets. Sometimes he makes their deaths look like accidents or blames someone else. Arthur heads out again, meets up with his buddy Harry McKenna, and hands over some cash. They chat at a local restaurant where Harry's got 2 bodyguards with him. Arthur says the job is done, and Harry compliments him, but hints he needs more friends. Arthur drives off into the night, eventually ending up at a musical. The next morning, Arthur's back at home looking for his next target, but gets a shocking request: kill his friend Harry. He calls to set up a meeting and is flown to a neutral location where he meets Dean Sanderson. Dean explains that a high-profile job in Africa went south because of a leak, killing 5 men. Only Arthur and Harry knew about it. Harry has also stashed $20 million in an offshore account and sold out the team. Dean gives Arthur 48 hours to finish the job, or he'll get someone else. The next day, Harry's at work grumbling about his guards' uniforms. Arthur, meanwhile, is investigating the failed mission and realizes Dean's claims are true. He calls Harry, warns him to leave the building, and tells him to cut the power and head to the elevator lobby. Arthur guides Harry through the building, ending up in a parking lot where Arthur reveals himself. Harry admires Arthur's cleverness, admitting that he used his own security to get him. Harry pulls a gun and shoots his own car to stage it as a carjacking. Arthur asks why he didn't just kill him himself, and Harry says he'd rather Arthur do it. Arthur then shoots Harry in the chest, feeling deep regret for killing his friend. At Harry's funeral, his son Steve McKenna approaches Arthur, then walks away. Steve returns and asks for a ride, which Arthur agrees to. During the drive, Arthur tells Steve that his father did care about him, despite their lack of communication. Steve reveals that the bank is repossessing Harry's house and that his dad's accounts are empty. As Arthur leaves, Steve asks why someone would shoot someone in a wheelchair, and Arthur, feeling gutted, just walks away. Later, Steve grieves in his own way, wrecking the house until he's seen in a car. A guy sneaks up on him, demanding the car. Steve, upset, beats the man senseless, almost killing him before Arthur intervenes. He puts Steve back in the car and drives off. The next day, Arthur is out shopping and gets spotted by Steve, who pulls up and asks if Arthur can train him to be a hitman. Arthur says no and heads to the dock to look at a boat he's thinking of buying. That night, Arthur looks at a photo of his late friend and calls Steve, giving him an address and a time to meet. When they meet, Arthur explains he's a mechanic, a hitman who solves problems. He says being a mechanic requires a certain mindset and that revenge isn't part of the job. They then adopt a dog together. The next day, Arthur instructs Steve to take the dog to a coffee shop, order black coffee, sit by the window, and do Sudoku puzzles every day for 3 weeks. He also takes Steve to a gun range daily, preparing him for combat. Arthur gives Steve an insurance book detailing various causes of death and wants him to study it. Meanwhile, Steve loses his car and house, and Arthur lets him stay at his place. Steve gets his shooting down to a science, and Arthur says it's time to level up. He takes Steve to what looks like a trap house, where Steve meets an arms dealer. Arthur gives him a list of guns, but then unexpectedly kills the arms dealer. He wanted Steve to witness it firsthand. Back at Arthur's place, Arthur explains that the dealer sold weapons to anyone and shows Steve their next target, Burke, a mechanic from the coffee shop with a weird obsession with chihuahuas, hence the need for the dog. Arthur's plan works perfectly, and Steve is invited out for a drink. That night, Arthur's prepping a lethal dose of poison to take take out Crane, but when Steve gets the chance to use it, he puts it back in his pocket. He thanks Crane and heads out, but Crane offers him a ride. Despite Arthur's protests, Steve ends up at Crane's massive, fancy mansion. Crane shows him around, and Steve decides to try offing Crane like Arthur did with the arms dealer. It doesn't go as planned, though, and they end up in a wild fight. Steve gets thrown around and beaten up, but manages to grab a screwdriver and stab Crane a bunch of times. Crane's still standing, but Steve keeps attacking until Crane finally drops. Back at Arthur's place, he's pissed about the mess and Steve's reckless behavior, but Steve doesn't seem to care. The next day, Arthur picks up a package at the airport and finds money and a phone inside. He calls the number, and Dean answers, saying he's not happy Steve was used for the job. Dean mentions a new, high-priority file that needs to be handled immediately. Arthur hangs up, and he and Steve look over the new target, a guy who's made a fortune from shady churches and fake programs. Steve calls him a cult leader, and they plan to kill him using adrenaline. In Chicago, Steve tells Arthur that a woman who left a Bible group with a target was found dead. Their target checks into a hotel, so Arthur and Steve get ready for action. They start climbing the building from the outside, and Arthur sets up cameras. They watch their target eat and go to sleep. The duo climbs up to the roof and sneaks into the hotel. It's cramped, so they send a camera through the vents to check the room, which is clear. Their target comes back, and they hear him complain through the audio they've set up. A doctor arrives and gives the target something strong that counteracts the adrenaline, so they need to rethink their plan. When the doctor leaves, Arthur and Steve quickly enter the room while the guards are outside. They improvise and kill their target, then escape just as the doctor returns and finds his client dead. He calls for backup, and as Arthur and Steve hide, Steve accidentally kicks a bolt that slips through the vents. The guards check it out, and Steve takes out one of them. They run while getting shot at, and Arthur takes down some goons as they make their way through the building. Steve nails 3 attackers in seconds, and Arthur does the same but runs out of bullets, using his hands instead. They hook up their lines and jump off the building while being shot at. They break into a room as the police arrive, split up to avoid suspicion, and Dean hears about the shooting. Arthur heads to the airport to go home, but spots the guy he thought was dead from the African mission. He follows him, sits next to him on a bus, and asks about Africa. The hitman reveals that Dean paid him a lot of money to kill the other 4 members, and Harry got suspicious, so they sent Arthur to kill him. The hitman pulls out a knife, and they fight in the cramped bus. Arthur injures the hitman and throws him out of the bus, where he gets hit by a passing car. Arthur returns to the dock to find May missing. Armed men arrive, searching for Arthur, who emerges from the water and takes out 3 of them effortlessly. He finds his friend dead in the water and calls Dean, saying he's coming for him. He slams the phone shut, gets on his boat, and calls Steve, who immediately aims a gun at him. Steve grabs a hidden gun from the couch and takes out the hitmen surrounding it. Arthur returns and tells Steve to grab some boxes while he looks for Dean's security guard. Steve finds his father's gun, but keeps quiet about it. On the way to Dean, Steve asks Arthur if he ever thinks about the people he's killed. Arthur admits he's killed people he knows and feels regret afterward. They drive to one of Dean's security guard's houses, shoot him, and corner his family. Arthur threatens the man's daughter to get him to talk, but when the cutting starts, it turns out to be a prank, and Arthur just used food instead. Arthur calls Dean and learns Harry's contract was worth $50 million. Dean offers him $10 million to walk away, but Arthur refuses. Dean laughs, saying a hitman for hire suddenly grew a conscience. Dean realizes Arthur's inside the building and tells his men to get him out. Arthur and Steve prepare for a heavy gunfight and set up a camera at the building's entrance. Arthur drives a car while Steve hijacks a bus. Steve starts driving, and Arthur spots Dean's car and floors it, taking out an accompanying van. Dean's men get out, guns blazing, and Arthur does the same. He jumps into a truck, and Steve crashes the bus into another of Dean's vehicles. Arthur comes from the other side, takes out Dean's car driver, and drags Dean out. They approach Dean, who's barely alive, and shoot him until their magazines are empty. With the mission a success, Arthur suggests they disappear together if Steve wants. Steve goes to get water, and Arthur spots Harry's gun. They drive for a bit, pull into a station, and Steve fills up the car. Arthur apologizes for everything that's happened, but Steve then moves the petrol and aims it at the car as he walks away. Arthur feels bad, but Steve pulls out his father's gun and fires, causing a massive explosion that kills Arthur. Steve heads back to Arthur's place and just sits down on the couch. He walks towards the music player and plays a song. He then goes to the car outside and jumps into it. He drives away, and the music player stops and triggers a bomb. Steve finds a note in the car saying he's dead, and boom, the car explodes into the air, and the house does exactly the same as it turns into a fireball. Back at the gas station, they look at the footage to see Arthur escaping his car before it exploded. It turns out he is alive and well, The second movie opens up with a nice and calming morning. Arthur awakens and goes through his daily routine of turning on his music player, having a coffee, and reading the paper. He exits the boat and arms a device just in case. His new life of tourism and kicking back has led him to even drive a bike. With that, he enters a restaurant and is walked to his usual eating spot. However, he is quickly approached by a woman who says she tracked him down. Her boss wants him to kill 3 people, and all must look like accidents, or else she will turn his new life upside down. He quickly takes out his phone and snaps a photo before whacking the woman. A fight immediately kicks off with the other assailants, and he shreds them. They stand no chance, and after taking out at least 6 of the men, he runs for it by scaling a wall. The woman and the remaining men get into the gondola underneath them, but he's not there. It seems he is on top of it and simultaneously spots a paraglider approaching him. The woman then shoots at him and climbs to the top until he jumps off and lands on the glider. That night, he returns to see his boat being ransacked. He jumps on his phone and activates the bomb. With that, he heads to a storage container and removes a floorboard to reveal a laptop. He puts the woman's face up and goes to his little arsenal. He burns his old passport, and it's time to get back to work. In southern Thailand, he rides a boat onto the shore. There, he meets up with an old friend named Me. He explains the situation, and she says the boss isn't here, and no one came next to his home. It's a nice little house, quite tropical. He removes another floorboard to find more passports, gun, and the sort. When night returns, he pays $10,000 to find information that links the woman from earlier to a man named Crane. The next beautiful morning, a woman named Gina asks Me if she has any first aid kit she can use. Me spots some bruising on Gina, who walks away. She then watches Gina's boat and thinks she's in trouble and quickly calls Arthur. He has a look from a distance, but says he has his own problems until Me says that he helped her once, and he should do it again for this woman. He immediately sets out and kills the boat's engine to make himself undetected. He quickly tells the man to stop, but he doesn't listen, and Arthur makes quick work of him, but accidentally kills him in the process. He hands Gina over to Me and heads downstairs, but disturbingly finds a pistol as well as a photo of himself. He drives the boat out some distance and tips petrol all over it. He launches a flare from a distance and ignites the boat, leaving no evidence. He immediately goes back and asks Gina who she is. After a gun is pulled, she confesses Crane blackmailed her to come to Arthur and fake as if she's in danger. She was then supposed to call a number when he rescued her. A gorgeous morning approaches once more, and as Arthur walks along the beach, Gina spots him. He puts on his gear and goes for a swim and soon discovers that Gina runs a shelter for young kids who were victims of some heinous crimes. It seems Crane threatened her shelter and the children, but Arthur then spots a boat from a distance and takes a look, but also finds them taking a look. He quickly goes outside and walks alongside Gina for Crane's people to think their plan is working. The two attend a local wedding. At night, Arthur lights a fire, and Gina approaches him and thanks him for what he has done for her and apologizes for bringing him into this mess. Her kids are the most important thing to her, and Arthur tells her that he too was an orphan who was sold to a gangster who made him into a soldier. Crane was also there. It turns out Arthur escaped, and Crane didn't. Gina feels nothing but apologetic for Arthur and gives him a hug. The next day, Crane's men, alongside the local police, jump onto the beach and kidnap Gina. Arthur puts up a fight, but he is eventually held at gunpoint and handed a phone. He is escorted to Bangkok and inside a mansion. When he sits down, a bomb activates, and Crane finally reveals himself. Arthur gets straight to business and tells Crane he will give him one chance and one chance only to walk away. Crane laughs at him and throws him a file containing 3 targets. The first target is Krill, a mass murderer and massive arms dealer, but he's locked up right now, and this gives him safety from his enemy. Crane then hands Arthur something to swallow only after he has confirmed the kill so that his men can track and pick him up. Gina, meanwhile, is taken to a high-class yacht, and Arthur does what he always does before a kill. He analyzes everything from the height of the walls to the sharks in the water. He looks through wanted posters and finds one that looks like him. He grabs a few items he'll need for the mission and gets back to his apartment, where he begins creating some stuff. He hides the tracker and does some math on how high the wall is. He replicates the wanted man's tattoos and also creates a fake passport. Walking through the streets, he intentionally annoys the cops, but when they see who he is, they arrest him. He is immediately taken to jail, and Crane's men wait outside the prison. Now comes the part when Arthur sees if his items are cleared to take in with him. The man searching it gives him the okay, and he walks into the prison. Arthur then spots Krill and his goons around him. One of the other prisoners says Krill killed so many people, and a lot of prisoners want him dead as he killed their families. But the guards around him make it impossible. Arthur spots a man hiding a knife, and he quickly steals it from him. Later in the day, Arthur sees a man running towards Krill with a knife attachment on him. He then throws his knife and saves Krill. Krill quickly gets up to see that Arthur saved his life, and he is quite grateful and asks him to join him for dinner. But Arthur says he doesn't enjoy the company around him. Krill uninvites the guards, and as night approaches, Arthur is escorted by the corrupt guards to the luxury suite of the jail. Krill invites him inside and says the man that Arthur killed today used to work for him and was upset because Krill killed his brother. Krill then says when he leaves the jail, he will run Africa. Almost immediately, Arthur puts his target into a chokehold and puts a towel over him to knock him out. He quickly makes some poison and forces Krill to drink it. His guards come in to check if everything is okay, and Arthur tells them Krill is meditating. But the guards receive wind of what just happened, and Arthur goes to the back wall and places some of his gum. He eats the device, puts shark repellent on himself, and the wall blows up behind him. The guards shoot at him as he dives off the side of the island into the water. Crane's men then pick up the location and bring Arthur onto their boat. He wants a call immediately with Gina, and Crane sets it up. Arthur asks her if she's holding up okay, and she says Crane has given him 36 hours to take out the next target, Adrian Cook. Crane then sees Arthur's father's watch on Gina and is very happy to see he finally found a weakness. In Sydney, Adrian sits atop a level 58 skyscraper. He is a mining billionaire and has plenty of manpower by his side. Arthur's got a major case of paranoia, but he's also got a huge ego. Arthur decides to get a lower level in the same building and distracts a woman long enough to snap a photo of the key. He studies the floor plans and makes a tiny homemade bomb covered with a screw. This bomb shatters glass with ease. Arthur puts on a mechanic's outfit and heads to the level below Adrian's. He removes a window and starts climbing up the skyscraper, step by step. When he finally reaches the pool, he uses a suction device to hang himself 58 floors up. He crosses the pool and positions himself to start screwing in and setting up his homemade bomb. Adrian spots him, but it's too late. Arthur drops down to the level below, causing the pool to collapse and Adrian to plummet to his death. Arthur walks away, and the news reports Adrian's death to Crane, who's stunned. Crane's goon sets up a call with Gina, but she angles the camera to show a boat behind her, and Arthur takes the call. Gina tells him the watch has stopped working, and Arthur scans the background. The goon realizes and attacks Gina. Arthur quickly calls the harbor master's office and finds out the boat's location. He jumps into a chopper, sees the ship is gone, and flies through the harbor to find it. He decides to jump from the chopper into the water, sneaks onto the boat, and starts taking out the thugs. He takes out another thug and moves toward Gina, getting a triple kill with his silenced pistol. He heads downstairs and gets into another fight with a few more guys. Out of bullets, he spots Gina, but gets shot at from all sides. He pulls off an impressive move to take down some guys, but his next trick is even better. He eventually gets captured and taken to Crane. Crane orders him to kill the third target, and as Arthur walks away, he continues to fight and takes out more goons. He jumps into the water, retrieves his hidden breathing mask, and swims away. In Bulgaria, Arthur drives around, planning to take out his third target, Max Adams, an American arms dealer. Max's stronghold is heavily defended and has world-class submarines. Arthur learns that Crane now controls most of the global weapons market after Krill and Adrian's deaths. He's determined to wipe out the competition. Arthur heads to a hospital and goes to the rooftop with a sniper rifle. He shoots a guy in the leg to get a chopper dispatched. Arthur hides in the chopper, and when it lands, he sneaks into Max's compound. He fries all the security cameras and starts taking out the guards. He heads to the control room and knocks out the men there. Reaching the vents, he sees an elevator going to the panic room and shuts it down, but Max still makes it to his panic room. Max scans his eyes and goes inside, only to find Arthur already waiting for him. Arthur says he just wants to talk, and Max realizes that Crane is targeting them all. Arthur offers Max a deal to stay alive, and Max agrees. They walk out together, and Max talks about how he helps the little guy in wars. Arthur then proposes using both the submarines and Max's death as bait. Max loves the idea and stages his death. Arthur gives him a breathing tank for underwater, and Crane gets news of Max's death. Although Max is still alive, Arthur calls Crane and says he'll only free Gina after Crane's men verify Max's death and steal the submarines. Arthur goes back to the compound and sets up deadly traps. He He knows the troops are coming and plans to take them all out. When they arrive, Arthur springs into action, decimating the enemy with traps, grenades, and rifles. He kills many and throws a grenade at the leader. Angering Crane, Arthur gets on his underwater device and heads toward Crane, but Crane grabs Gina and uses her as bait. Crane monitors all cameras to track Arthur. Arthur emerges from the water. He throws a blade at the camera, causing trouble for Crane. Arthur fights his way to Gina, but she's shot while trying to escape. Crane takes her hostage, and Arthur gets into a firefight with more men. Crane activates the boat's self-destruct mode. With little time left, Arthur finds Gina in the control room, discovers the bomb, and sends Gina away in an escape pod. Crane wants Arthur dead, but Arthur's too skilled. They fire at each other until they run out of bullets and switch to hand-to-hand combat. Arthur wins and ties Crane to the boat with a chain. With seconds left, Arthur runs into the boat as Crane screams his name, and the boat explodes. Gina watches the wreckage and cries. A rescue boat arrives, and emergency services are called. Max watches Gina being taken away and is told there are no survivors. Later, Gina is back in Cambodia at her children's center. She writes to me, thanking her for everything but still grieving Arthur's death. As she's with the kids, she stops in shock when she sees Arthur standing in front of her. They share a smile, and the scene cuts to Max reviewing the security footage of the boat wreckage. He realizes Arthur used a secret compartment and laughs at Arthur's cleverness.
Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up. It really helps the channel out. If you're new here, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you never miss an update. We'd love to hear your thoughts, so drop a comment below with your suggestions for future videos, any questions you have, or just to say hi. Your feedback is super important to us and helps us create better content for you. Also, feel free to share this video with your friends, family, and on social media. It really makes a big difference and helps our community grow. You can follow us on Insert your social media handles for more updates and behind-the-scenes content. Thanks again for your support, and we'll see you in the next video.